minutes. And you can argue that the most valuable resource is actually time, especially
Mhm.
people who work in the industry, like knowledge workers, people who actually use Google and tools like Perplexity for their day-to-day life, where they're trying to do useful things. So in that, if you look at those users, actually, yes, Google is free, but you paying Google with your time.
Yeah.
And so basically there is an opportunity where, okay, so like, yes, I'm going to save my time, but I'm probably going to pay a little bit more for that. And as long as you can provide this service where it's still like net benefit for people.
Yeah.
Today's guest is Denis Yarats, who is CTO at Perplexity, one of my favorite products and one of the most successful AI startups today. With Denis, we talked about the state of AI products and his vision about where they're going. Then we talked about Perplexity as a company, how the team is organized, how engineers work, and how they use AI themselves. So let's dive right into the action after a short word from our sponsors. Many of you who work in larger companies or have gone through due diligence have had to keep track of how much open source is in the code. So what's coming next now is having to keep track of how much Gen AI code is in your code. A company called SEMA, led by Matt, who is a longtime refactoring member, is building the AI code monitor to help. What you see on this screen is using the AI code monitor to measure Gen AI composition during a code review. If you want to try it, refactoring members get 2 extra few weeks. You can learn more at semasoftware.com and you can find the link in the podcast notes.
Hey, Dennis, welcome here, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello, glad to be here, and thanks for having me.
So, Dennis, you're CTO at Perplexity, which is one of my favorite products and one of the most successful AI startups today. You also recently announced a massive 250 million round by some incredible investors. So, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you. I guess we haven't announced this publicly yet, so that's probably the rumors. But
I
yeah,
mean,
thank you.
I've read the rumors, so I took it for granted, but it's in the rumors, let's say. So the first thing I would love to talk about is your journey, right? Because I've seen other interviews of yours and with Arvind, and what's really interesting to me is how you didn't exactly start with web search. Like you tried different things and you ended up here. So how did it go? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. To be frank, I think this is a kind of like strategic point. We always wanted to do search, but it was just if you go to investors and you tell them I want to build a search company, that was in 2022, they would tell you, okay, there is Google already, so maybe you want to do something else. But I have background in search and LLMs. I've been doing this for all my professional career, and kind of like always wanted to do that. And so we decided, okay, so let's sort of like tell that we're gonna do something else and like try out things, but also kind of like on the back end work on the stuff that we actually want to do, which is search. So yes, we have a sort of like initial idea was, okay, so let's do maybe structured search. Maybe it's a little bit easier. So we'll do search over like databases, and we kind of like use the older generations of the models. So the idea
Yeah.
would be, you take a query, translate it to SQL, run a query, and sort of like analyze the result. So that's been going okay, but it kind of like also prototyped during that time unstructured search and sort of like using
Mm.
search real web search engines, and that one was working way better, and it was
Yeah.
like way more useful and just like wide has like wider audience. And so we just needed to have this like a moment. We just didn't know like how to roll it out, like how to introduce it, because like people would just not use it, because there's a Google. But we were in
Yeah.
the right moment, in the right time. ChatGPT happened. That opened up a lot of eyes, and people
Yeah.
became like very more receptive to AI, and so, but we already have like everything that we need, and within like days we launched our product, and yeah, people were very happy to use it, and it was like very interesting to see. We kind of like been trying to sort of like advertise or like have customers to use this like text to SQL product, and it was just like, people were like not super excited. They would try it, but then it just like doesn't work. They were just, okay, maybe I'll try it next day. But like you clearly did not see a lot of tractions. But with this search, it was just like very clear right away. And then we so very quickly, within a week or two, we kind of like decided, okay, this is exactly what we want to do. Let's just focus on it full time.
Yeah, and at that point, I guess you could maybe more easily talk with investors, I suppose, to just having the idea on paper
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
going.
That's
Yeah,
that helped a lot, because like we would that was around like very close to Christmas break, and we were like,
yeah,
okay, so we still were like not certain. We were like, okay, let's see how it what happens over. Maybe it's a fad. Maybe it's like week away, 1 week after, maybe after the
yeah,
Christmas holidays, traffic is gonna drop. But to our surprise and excitement, it did not drop. It actually continued to grow, and so that was a very clear signal to us that there's something in it, and we should just continue it, because it's
it-
very rare when you launch something and just like keeps going right away.
yeah. Like instant product market fit, basically. So I'm going back to what you said at the beginning, that it would have been hard to go to investors straight away and say, we're going to do web search, right? Because when you think about it, uh, this is one of the most heavily guarded use cases in tech, right? So a product like Perplexity, made by a small startup, by some accounts, it shouldn't even exist, right? So how is Perplexity winning users over Google, myself included? By the way, it's my default search engine on the browser. So what makes Perplexity special to you?
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same idea. What made Google so successful in the early days is just we have a very strong alignment with what users actually want to see from search. So they want to get the answers that they can trust, that they can rely on. They want to get them, very fast, and something that's going to like improve their productivity. So Google over time, it started like that, but because of many iterations on the ranking system, and then the obviously ads system, that target function is sort of like slightly different than what users want.
Yeah,
It's more like what makes money, and so that's sort of like this divergence. I think is an important factor, and I think something that our product does well. But also I think it's kind of like also allows you to add on top of the classical search engine, where
mm,
it sort of like simplifies a lot of workflows. So now like instead of you going and clicking on all the links and then kind of like reading information by yourself and then making your research, you can ask on this like very powerful technology that only recently emerged, which is an LLM, do this work for you. And like obviously going forward, this is just going to be much more advanced as the models become better, as we improve products. So it kind of like goes way beyond the general like search capabilities. So like
yeah.
so it's more like answer engine, and eventually it's going to be even more than that.
Yeah, I'm thinking there is like this big debate where people are wondering how startups will be able to win over incumbents in this AI shift, right? Because many say AI is very expensive, running your own models or creating your own models, so it needs, compute, it needs a lot of money. So how do you think AI startups like you can eventually win? So it will be because you can go places that big tech cannot go, or it's like raw speed and quality of execution. How do you see this like long term?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, it's for sure like our cost per query is way much higher than Google's, but on the other hand, I think we can do much more complicated things. And you can argue that the most valuable resource is actually time, especially
Mhm.
people who work in the industry, like knowledge workers, people who actually use Google and tools like Perplexity for their day-to-day life, where they're trying to do useful things. So in that, if you look at those users, actually, yes, Google is free, but you paying Google with your time.
Yeah.
And so basically, there is an opportunity where, okay, so like, yes, I'm going to save my time, but I'm probably going to pay a little bit more for that. And as long as you can provide this service where, it's still like net benefit for people,
Yeah.
I think they're just going to use it. So it's just like, yeah, definitely will require like rethinking what is the monetization strategy here, like and what are the other ways, but it's like clearly sort of like the extra dimension. So and it's kind of like proportional also to the complexity of the tasks. Like obviously, if you do something simple like some navigational query, yes, you can do it like very cheaply.
Yeah.
In Google, it's kind of like all types of queries is like the same, right? So it's just like
Yeah.
the same level of complexity. So you either find it or not. Here, you kind of like the cost of the query is going to be proportional to the compute. And
Yeah.
so more expensive, more complicated queries will require more compute, but they're also going to save you more time. And
Yeah.
so there is this like nice equilibrium where you trading off compute for time. And like compute is going to be the currency of the future. So, and people are just going to be
Yeah,
paying for
yeah,
that.
and for what it's worth, it's exactly the value proposition that works for me. I mean, saving time, especially on complex queries, saving really a ton of time on those. And I think one of the things that makes Perplexity peculiar is that it sits on top of the existing AI models, and users can even choose what to use, can swap them. So, do you think this is the model that for AI startups that will eventually win, like with standard AI models embedded into all kinds of products made by startups, as opposed to, I don't know, vertical user experiences made by the same few people who make the models, like OpenAI and the likes?
Yeah, this is a very sort of like a strategic decision that we made early on. We kind of like realized that there's not going to be too many models, but there is going
Yeah,
to be several very like frontier models. And then and also like over time only a few organizations will be able to deliver frontier models, because it's just like it is very expensive. And if we
yeah,
decided, okay, so we were like a small startup, we decided we're going to build our foundational model first and then we launch the product, we would have absolutely zero chance.
yeah,
And so, but like what LLM and LLM API sort of like enabled, which was not possible, let's say like a couple of years ago, is you can start your product, you can validate your product right away. And then if you see there is a strong market fit, then you can sort of like, uh, start the product and then re-engineer, like build infrastructure later. So, I mean, like our bet was just, the product is still going to be the most important thing. So yes, LLM is useful. It's very essential to what we do. But in the end, people need product. People don't like they don't want to have like access to like directly to a LLM and just like figure out like what to do. And so we designed our product and our infrastructure in a way that we can support several models. So it's kind of like making not trivial to make it work with different models like seamlessly, so we can like
yeah,
switch that very easily. Also, for some other cases, as open source pre-trained model emerged and they became more capable, we also invested a lot in our infrastructure where we can serve those models internally, very cheaply, very
yeah,
fast, and so they power like a lot of use cases. But yeah, we decided that we're not going to be in a position where we sort of like go after like frontier models, at least like for now.
yeah,
And we kind of like made it strategic bets, so we will just be very good at like utilizing different models from different
yeah.
providers, but also taking advantage of the open source models as well.
Yeah, and speaking of open source models, do you think eventually open source models are going to catch up with proprietary models, and that is the destiny as it was with open source software, which we can say eventually won, or is it a different thing?
Yeah, this is going to be definitely very interesting to see. I'm not sure right now. I don't have a good answer. I think I can see it evolving in either ways, where open source model is going to be very capable, but they still gonna lag behind the frontier models. On the other hand, yeah, who knows? Maybe there is going to be like very capable and very comparable models to the frontiers one. So
Hmm.
I don't know yet. I think it's we will see this unfolding. But we kind of like preparing for the both outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the most sensible thing to do. And do you think we should still expect like big gains from new generations like GPT-5 and the likes, or do you think we are going to see like diminishing returns, at least with the current LLM architectures?
I don't think so. I think we like still. I think we still have a lot of room to grow. Just I mean, even like a good example was even GPT-4. So the model actually was trained, finished training like almost 2 years ago.
Yeah,
But we've seen incredible sort of like improvements on top of this base model through like better like post-training techniques,
true.
better data, and now like it's clear that the not only post training matters a lot, but like pre-training matters a lot, but post training as well. And then more recently, sort of like the synthetic data is gonna matter a lot. So I think we probably still far away from saturating that growth. Just like yeah, so
That's
I'm very
exciting.
optimistic.
Yeah, that's very exciting to hear. So you obviously live and breathe AI. So and the very interesting thing to me is that not just from a technical point of view, but you run a company where you have to be thinking all the time about what people may do with it and how people may want to use it. So how is it for your team? How do you use AI at Perplexity?
Yeah, I think we use it everywhere. Basically, we are kind of that's another like big advantage. You with the tools that you have right now, you can have a much smaller team. We can achieve much more than it used to be before, just because superior tools. I think we're trying to use LLMs in everything we do. You know, prototyping. Like doing the whatever if you want to like do like something like a new model. So that's always you kind of like can use a lot of bigger models for like data annotation, for example,
Mm,
like evaluations and stuff like that. So it's just I think like the rule of thumb I do like okay, so like before we start using humans for any task, we better first figure out if we can use an LLM for that. If it's not, and in most cases it is actually true, yeah, it saves a lot of time, saves a lot of money, and yeah, so far we've seen a lot of very successful applications of that, and I think as models become even more smarter and more capable, I think it's going to open up even more opportunities.
yeah, love the mindset. First, you try to use an LLM for that, and then if it fails, you try to go with a human. So you said that basically AI one of the things that allows you to do is to having a smaller team than would be otherwise, being able to achieve great things. And so, how what does your product engineering team look like, and how do you work?
Yeah, we have pretty small team still. I think around maybe around like 60 people, 60 70 people. We very have like very flat organization. Primarily, yeah, have like a very capable engineers who can operate in a lot of uncertainty with just like very high level sort of like directions or like instructions, right? So like and then you just yeah, have like curious people who want to try like different things, and they also, I think it's prerequisite that they're also very excited about AI, and they're very excited about like trying these new technologies. And then they sort of like because this is a brand new, right? So there is no like right answers. We don't know yet, so you have to try a lot of things. You have to see what works, what doesn't work, and sort of like think you need to have this mindset where you think not about like what is possible right now, but what's going to be possible in like 6 months or a year. And I think this is very important because this field moves as fast as I've seen anything moving. And you have to, if you basically not thinking about this, that means you're already behind.
Yeah. And so basically what you're saying is that engineers have a lot of autonomy. Is it like they own like full parts of the product and they go autonomously after new features, and how does it work?
Yeah. We usually try to have everyone have like a sort of like a piece of a product or infrastructure that they own, and then they're like, they have like some high level vision where it needs to go, what needs to be done, and yeah, they then autonomously like operate. So there is like, usually we try not to have big teams on any projects, like couple people max. I think because again that comes back to the level of tooling we have right now, where we are very like talented, but a small team of like 2 to 3 engineers can do a lot of things and a lot of stuff done. So the advantage of this approach as well is that you don't have to waste time and energy on like coordination.
Yeah.
Just those people can like just organize themselves very well, and yeah, things just happen. It is obviously, I think, it took us some time to get here. It's not like magically happens, but I think it's a function of hiring the right people, and sort of like empowering them, and sort of like establishing this like culture and operation mode.
Yeah. So what you said, hiring the right people. What kind of people are you looking for? Is there something about the attitude, the potential, or rather the skills?
Yeah. So definitely, I think we as we start, like when we only started, we kind of like had this way of hiring people where we just don't have a normal interview, but we would have a trial period. And so first 10 to 15 people, I think, were like hired through that period. And so basically what it entails, we get a potential candidate, we have them to work with us for like a couple of days on like a project. And the way we kind of like during that period, we like try to emulate the real world scenario. So we actually give them a real world product, and then see if they can make progress in like 3 days. And like the best people usually can. And then so once we identify those people, then we're like trying to hire. And that was like, obviously right now we cannot do this for like various reasons. Just like but it was a very useful thing for us to do, and I think it was like fundamental, what enabled us to hire like the very strong core of people. And then the good thing about this is just then those people will sort of like have exactly the same mindset as the founders had, and then they would like bring similar people as well, and so that's kind of like deeply propagates into the culture, into the way we operate. And yeah, so I think for people, for the candidate, I think like what we value, I think it's actually more important to sort of like recognize the curiosity they like drive, rather than, we would always prefer like candidates who are maybe just like less experienced, but they just like
Yeah.
super passionate, they can work hard, they would like think about the future, they're like very excited about what we do, over like people who are like, like, and the typical engineer from Google who've been there like 8 years, just work on some feature, and then he just like doesn't
Yeah.
know anything outside of Google. So that those people not going to work well in our company.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I love the work trials. Yeah. So how do you run it? Basically, you have to keep some backlog of things that are suitable for these first timers. And how long do the trials last?
Yeah, this was like, very early in the development of our company. I think at that time we have like very few people, and we have way more tasks than our projects that we wanted to work on than people. So it was a very natural way. We like literally would invite somebody, and we'll just give them something that we would like to work on, and then we'll see if they can perform on it or not. And yeah, so, and then yeah, they would like come in, like they would come into the office, they would sort of like we sit together, and then we, yeah, basically the idea is just like it's kind of like they're already like part of the company, and kind of like, and we would like see can we work with them together, because I think like for a startup it's also super important to make sure that you also perfectly align on the vision, on the like culture, on like attitude, right? So because that's especially for the initial stages of the company, that's very important. So you want to like have a very small but like super aligned group of people, so then you can like move very fast and achieve like great things.
Yeah, yeah, and you also have like managerial roles, like engineering managers or tech leads or tech managers. So basically, everything that is not strictly engineers.
Yeah, until actually we were like until very recently we didn't have any engineering manager. We were like very flat company. I think only I had like a lot of reports, like half of the company, Johnny, another co-founder, had like the other half of the company was very sort of like we just work together, we just like don't care about the like the work structure or anything, so just do things. And we actually to this day, even though like now we're like almost 70 people, that's how we operate. We only recently hired the engineering manager, and we have a few sort of like product managers as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think like engineers a lot of power, and they like decide a lot. We just trying to add like a little bit more like organization as we scale. But yeah, it's still very flat, and I think so
yeah.
far worked out for us very well.
Yeah, I think it ties back to what you said before, that now with AI and better tooling, there's all this conversation around that you can go a lot further without formal management, without layering and things like that. So you said you just started hiring managers. So did you see some kind of tipping point or duties that you needed engineering managers for, that make you say, okay, I have to start hiring engineering managers?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, it was just like became kind of impossible to just meet with everyone, like even like for 15 minutes every week, just like to see how. And so that's mostly of that nature, and like but I think yeah, I think we still sort of like will try to preserve this kind of like a flat structure, not too many layers. I think it's yeah, it's still you can push it like pretty far. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about. I ask many questions about how teams like you operate, because from the outside you move very fast, you do incredible things. So, so it's like you're at the frontier of how small startups can operate at elite level, right? So, it's great already to hear about how you're trying to stay flat, how engineers have a lot of ownership. So with this kind of flat organization with a lot of bottom-up input, how do you plan work? Do you have like a long-term vision and roadmap, and maybe also some bottom-up input? How do you reconcile this?
We do we trying to be strategic and about like what things we work on, and so we yeah have a plan for not too far away, but like at least like 6 months, and sort of like the top level like directions, and then those top level directions then like translate into like quarterly and monthly projects. And then yeah, a lot of those projects yeah being led by engineers. Some people some projects probably like are led by like PMs, for example, and or myself or Johnny, so that type of stuff. But it's a yeah, it's been basically kind of a self organized, yeah. So we just have like, okay, so this is a high level goals, this high level directions, this is what
Yeah,
we want to do, this is the projects that we're going to go after. Let's see, let's figure out how we can go after them, and like what needs to be done. And we usually also not trying to overthink and over engineer a lot. We just, okay, so let's, what is the minimal thing we can do here? Okay, let's just
mhm.
get it done, let's see how it works. If it shows like any promise, then we'll continue. So instead of like investing a lot into something and then realizing, oh, actually maybe it wasn't that a great of idea. So it's
Yeah.
very important to be sort of like transparent and like evaluate at each a stage of the project, and so like making sure it's still the most important thing that you need to do. So I think like maybe especially in this field of AI, like things changing like so rapidly. That's why like
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be very agile and like you have to adapt very quickly. Just because there's like a bigger powers, external powers that you cannot control. Like for example, if like a new model drops and has
Yeah.
like much better capabilities, and so then you have to adapt for that. But yeah, so that's why it's very important to
Yeah.
sort of like self-reflect and see and ask these questions. Is this the most important thing you're working on right now? Should you do something else?
Yeah, yeah, and I think this kind of agility, this ability to, let's say, a new model comes out, you drop everything and make it supported in Perplexity. It's one of those things that are an asset for you versus big tech, right? You can afford to drop everything and go after the very best thing you should be doing right now, even if you have just figured it out, because you're not compelled to follow like a year-long plan at all costs, I believe.
Yeah, exactly right. This is like I would say like the biggest advantage of a smaller startups compared to the bigger organizations. You can basically change the uh, um, your direction on a dime. So.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you said you have like 60 to 70 people, which
Mhm.
my experience is that size where you're still like a small company, but it's that size that's where things may start to break, like organizational wise. It's not like everybody works on everything all the time. So do you have like small teams that are like durable, working always on the same things, or you assemble like feature teams for when something has to be developed and then people rotate on different things? So how does it work?
Yeah, it's a mix of both. There is a more like long term projects that are sort of like more like on the infrastructure. So for example, like we build like training infrastructure, we build inference infrastructure, search infrastructure. So those are much longer horizon projects, and
Mm-hmm.
people sort of like tend to stay there for like longer and work on those. But there is also like some of the maybe like some of the things that are kind of like okay, so like maybe a couple of weeks or like a month long project. So then for those we like usually mix and match somebody who maybe have a maybe they want to work on this, maybe they like have a more interest in this project, so then they would go and work on it. So yeah, it's also I think it's important to make it interesting for people so they have like different challenges, so that they just don't do exactly the same thing. But like yeah, lucky enough it's just there's like so much exciting stuff to do, so we never have a we always have like way more stuff to do than we have resources for, so that's never been a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, and it definitely feels from the outside that you have always plenty of exciting things to do. I mean, you ship a lot of things, so I mean, from the outside, it looks like a top engineering team, which always fires from all this the cylinders, pushing out new features. So I'm wondering, what's the developer experience? I mean, how often you ship? Do you have like intermediate environments, like staging? How do developers work and the whole life cycle of code?
Yeah, we're trying to be very we're trying to be ship things fast, but we also care a lot about quality, so we
Hmm.
tend to spend a lot of time like testing things, evaluating, making sure like they're gonna if we launch them they're gonna work properly as expected. So to that, yeah, we have to build a lot of infrastructure, a lot of tooling to make sure we can sort of like test the features before it goes to
Hmm.
production. So and that's like things where there's like benchmark and evaluation sets where we can test the quality. There is like obviously like some regression and performance benchmarks as well. There
Hmm.
is stages where we have a human in the loop. Sometimes humans will like go ahead and like check the quality of certain features. There is I guess LLM as well. Sometimes it goes and checks if the if things work as expected. And then yeah, like the staging, like A/B testing. So all of that kind of like more classical stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, each feature goes through the especially now like that we've got bigger, we've got like more responsibilities
Mm.
for our users, and so we try to sort of like only put the best work out. So we don't want to like maybe like very early on when we have like 3 people working on it, yeah, we kind of like would ship like things a little bit faster, just because we could afford it. So now we just still trying to ship as fast as possible, but also care a lot about the quality, because eventually this is builds into your brand, and like people, when they always go to Perplexity, they expect it always works. There is no bugs. It works as expected. Works fast. Gives you accurate answers. High quality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I appreciate it because I think that this is a kind of culture that stems from the type of product that you're building. I mean, one of the biggest value propositions of Perplexity is the actual user experience that it provides. So it makes sense to me that you build a culture around sweating the details of that kind of user experience and making it good, right? And making sure
yeah.
that it stays good.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think it like takes a lot of time to build that and build this trust, but it also it's very easy and it's very fast where you can like tear it down.
Yeah.
So we have to be like very careful about that. And then we kind of like also try to keep things simple. Okay, so you just like the main like sort of like 2 objectives is like, can we deliver fast and very accurate answers? Like I feel like if we
Yeah.
deliver on those 2 dimensions, and
Yeah.
like delightful user experience, like this 2 3 dimensions, if you can deliver, that's ultimately what's going to matter. Like yeah, you can build all the features, but if you sort of like don't do well on those 2 3 dimensions, then you have no chance.
Yeah, and you said fast and accurate answers, and I actually think what surprised me the most about Perplexity the first time that I used it was how fast it was, because I think that I had already seen and tried, LLMs navigating the web and searching for things, but it was always a very slow experience. That it only made sense to me for the most complex queries where you were actually saving a lot of time. But I think Perplexity hit that kind of threshold of being that fast that it made it viable for a wider range of searches for which otherwise I would have gone to Google. So, do you have like a secret sauce for making it so fast? How do you pull this off?
Yeah, basically, yeah, we spend a lot of time sort of like optimizing this. I think it's basically we will have to inspect every single component of our stack and like see where is the bottlenecks. I think like optimization itself is this like you have to go after the most expensive things first. Like it
Mm,
doesn't matter to optimize things that are like only take like 2% of total request time. So like if you
yeah,
optimize like 50%, that thing is only going to be just 1%. So like doesn't really matter. But like if you optimize something that takes like 80% of your time and you optimize by 10%, so you're gonna have a big improvement. So we have to be very methodical about that and very careful. And so initially had to build a lot of tooling to like really see what is going on, where time goes for each request. Once we
mm,
had this like very clear picture, a very clear map of what's going on, then we then identified this is the things that we need to work on to improve latency, and we just went and sort of like work on that, and then like build things which like have to. That's why it's very important to kind of control the end-to-end experience,
yeah,
because once you do that, there is like so many interesting ways where you can optimize things. Like if you just only control like LLM, or you only control search, there's yeah, kind of makes it a little bit harder because you essentially like operating on the black box. But yeah, if you sort of like have an end-to-end product and you know exactly how people use it, what people need, you can be very creative and you can optimize things a lot. Exactly the same process goes to the quality. You
mm,
just need to have a very accurate, very telling evals, and kind of like really understand what's going on. because this is like even much harder problem than latency. It's much easier to measure latency. Here, like you have to measure
Yeah.
quality, which is a very subjective thing. But it's still, you can do a lot of strides towards that direction, and I think that's something also we sort of like haven't solved this problem, but like we're trying to do our best and like every day making progress towards it. I think it's it's very important to what we do.
Yeah, I'm curious about this very last thing that you said, because I agree that, I mean, latency may be hard, but it's at least very pretty much measurable. But how do you measure the fact that Perplexity's answers are actually improving in terms of accuracy? Maybe they're more concise, maybe, or just, people love them more. I mean, how do you work to make sure that you're actually improving on that?
Yeah, it's a very very hard problem. I think it's you basically have to utilize all the signals and all the tools that you have. Yes, you want to collect all the explicit signals that user provides. You have to rely a lot on the human evals, like where you actually have like real humans who like provide results and like evaluate the different answers and like say which answer is better. They have like very uh, um, clear guidelines. What is how is the good answer should look like, how is the bad answer should look like, what things they should focus on. As models become more capable, I think a lot of this stuff can be automated with the even more powerful LLMs, and so you can kind of like have different LLMs that kind of like judge different aspects of
Yeah,
answers. So for example, they can tell, oh, is this citation that you've done, is it actually accurate citation or not? So you can have like a model that like only sort of like
it
knows
does
how to do
that.
that,
Yeah,
and then you use that to guide humans. Like so you like before human like you essentially your goal is to like minimize the involvements of humans as much as possible, and so you just like use them as the final like judge and try to do all the work like automatically, and so then they actually have to make a decision. They have like all information in place, and then they can very quickly say, okay, this is good, this is not good, and then just provide like a holistic evaluation. So yeah, we had to build a lot of tools for that. We had to like train a team of evaluators and human in the loop, and yeah, kind of like also employ a lot of like sort of like different other metrics. The more like classical like non-parametric metrics. Um, yeah, but yeah,
wow.
it's work in progress, and there's like so much stuff to do here.
Wow, this is such an interesting part of the stack of the development process, because QA and end-to-end testing, everything that tests for quality from the user perspective, is so expensive right now, and in engineering teams, those kind of tests are expensive. If you run it through an external service with real humans, it's expensive. It's also not exactly reliable. You get a lot of flaky tests. A lot of teams struggle with that to the point where they either don't do end-to-end regression tests at all, or they only test their key workflows. So the idea that you can automate these or part of these by introducing LLMs but keeping humans in the loop uh, should be very powerful. I mean, thinking about the future, you can probably spin off another product just on that.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's clearly where it's going. I'm pretty sure like a lot of the human annotation firms already sort of like doing a lot of stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
just becomes not only sort of like improves margins for this business, but also more importantly makes the quality of the output is much higher. Because yeah, you just want to automate as many things as possible, and only have humans for the most important stuff.
yeah. And so you're saying that in some cases this is kind of already working for you. You have LLMs doing
Oh yeah.
some parts of QA.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been like bread and butter.
Wow, that's amazing, really. And so, thinking about the future, thinking about these rumors of the next funding, which is not confirmed. Let's say you would take funding in the future.
Mhm.
Let's take it for granted. What are the next steps and your challenges for Perplexity, for as a product, as a team? So, what's your mind thinking about as a CTO? and a founder?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's just we kind of like we're definitely going to use new funding for just improving our team, hire
Mm.
like best people, and then spend a lot of the money or like funding on building even better infrastructure. I think uh, there is just like so much stuff to do. Like as we scale, as our product grows, there's like so many features we want to deliver. Like clearly, where things are going is going to be this like agentic behaviors where you will be able
Yeah,
to do answer like very complicated questions, and then maybe those agents not only going to give you an answer but also perform actions uh, based on the results of the research. So that type of stuff. There is like certain verticals I think that's going to be like very interesting, where we can like look into like personalization, where we can look like into like maybe some of the like shopping experience and stuff like that. I think those things are going to be like very interesting to reimagine with this like new technology. Yeah, so I think yeah, like the just and obviously like the things that are sort of like going to be always there, as I mentioned, quality and like latency and delightful user experience that also like needs resources to maintain and get better. So we intend to fully invest into making our product better, make it so people happy using it, and just like keep adding like new capabilities that are going to make it even more valuable.
yeah, yeah, totally. And I was thinking that in the past, thinking of the past decade, current, big tech generation of companies, when some company announced the round, like 200 million type of round, they would enter this kind of hyper growth story where headcount would double every 6 months or so. The Uber of the world. So, uh, do you think about a similar trajectory for Perplexity, or as we said before, since with each generation tooling gets better, companies get leaner, you're thinking about keeping a much smaller team, maybe?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think it's going to be possible. I think like you can do much more with the fewer people now than used to be, maybe even like a couple of years ago. We definitely try to stay as lean as possible. Obviously, I think like basically like our strategy for like hiring people is just okay. So we have something that we want to work on, and but we don't have like enough headcount for this, and they were just like okay, and we kind of like anticipate this is going to happen maybe like in a couple of months. Let's see if we can get somebody who can help us to do that. So it's not like we're just like hiring people without knowing what they're going to do. uh, but yeah, I feel like you're just focusing on quality rather than quantity, and then if you now with the tools that out there, people can be way more productive. And so yeah, we will see. I think like we're one of the sort of like this first companies of the maybe like the next generation of the companies that kind of like can do a lot of stuff with fewer people. And yeah, we'll see how this is going to play out, but I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, I feel that in a way you're paving the road even for others, right? I'm thinking about many things that we discussed, like automating and with QA with LLMs or using LLMs in the development process. And this is part of what makes companies able to operate with less engineers, right? So other companies will look at how Perplexity does things and will get inspired and will be able to do more with less, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think my bet is that in maybe 5 to 10 years, there's going to be like a one-person company that's going to be very successful.
Yeah, yeah,
So
probably. I don't remember
uh,
who said that, but we are almost ready, for 1 billion one-person company. You
yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
see that. So, Dennis, thank you so much for this chat. It was awesome. I took so many notes. We covered a lot of ground. So, thank you again for coming to the show and for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun to talk about these things. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm.
See you in the next episode.